Welcome to the new session on matters pertaining to clinical trials and ethics. This is a series organized by the Regional Bioethics Program, which is part of the Unit of Science and Knowledge for Impact of the Department of Evidence and Intelligence for Action in Health, and the Unit on Quality and Regulation of Medications and Health Technology of PAHO, which is part of the Department on Access to innovation. Before we start the session, let me clarify that we will use the Q&A functions of Zoom for any question you may have. You may ask it in Spanish or English, Portuguese or French, or any additional comment or material that you wish to share. Please then put your comment or question in the chat. We will not be issuing a certificate for attendance at this virtual seminar. The seminar is being recorded, and this session, like the preceding ones, will be shared on the list of ethical research of PAHO, the portal of clinical trials, and the website of the Regional Bioethics Program. At an earlier seminar, we said that this year we would be launching a lot of the PAHO initiatives, and it is a pleasure this time to launch the Clinical Trials Accelerator of PAHO. And I'd like to begin the session by inviting Dr. Sebastián García Saizo, the Director of the Department of Science and Intelligence for Action in Health, Evidence and Science Intelligence for Action in Health, to say words of welcome. Go ahead. Thank you very much, Carla, and good afternoon to everyone. I'd like to underscore that this seminar is being held in the week where we celebrate the World Health Day 2026, where we are appealing for everyone to work together for science, to join efforts, to share innovative knowledge, and ensure that health decisions are based on the best evidence possible. With this, the Pan American Health Organization reaffirms its commitment to science, because science is our lifesaver for our well-being and for the well-being of our societies. I thank each and every one of you for having joined this appeal, for participating in this initiative, and through this, helping to strengthen science in our region of the Americas. I'd like to thank the Unit on Science and Knowledge for the effort they've made to organize this agenda with the Unit on Regulation of Medication, Quality Education, and particularly Carla, who is the head of the seminar. To highlight the celebration of the World Health Day, we have also the words from our director, Dr. Jarbas Barbosa da Silva, who wants to speak to all of you. Thank you. Could you please show Dr. Barbosa's message now? Thank you, Sebastián. Thank you for your words, and colleagues. Thank you. Please now share Dr. Barbosa's words.
On World Health Day 2026, we call on researchers, health authorities, funders, institutions, and communities to join forces together for science, to foster innovation research and ensure that every health decision is guided by the strongest evidence. Science saves lives. It improves health and well-being and strengthens economies. Over the past decade, PAHO member states have greatly strengthened their scientific capacity. Health science publications have grown nearly tenfold, and the Americas have contributed vital evidence in priority areas such as Zika and malaria. Biotechnology innovation is now advancing faster than in many historically leading research economies. PAHO's Clinical Trial Accelerator is part of this progress. It enhances the impact and efficiency of clinical trials, enabling countries to lead studies that address the needs of their populations. The initiative offers tools ranging from study designs to artificial intelligence-driven solutions, moving research from a reactive approach to a proactive, forward-looking strategy, and it speeds up the development of safe and effective health interventions. We solve challenges faster when we work together. Across the Americas, we aim to implement large-scale collaborative multi-country trials to develop effective scientific solutions. Emerging technologies such as gene therapy are no longer just a promise, they are a reality. Our next task is to bridge the access gap and deliver these life-saving treatments to everyone who needs them. Let me now switch to Spanish. Nuestra salud no puede entenderse de manera aislada.
Our
La salud de las
health,
personas, los animales,
the health
las
of people,
plantas y el medio
animals,
ambiente
plants, the
están
environment,
interconectadas.
all are
La
interconnected.
ciencia es fundamental para poner
Science
en
is
práctica el enfoque
fundamental
de una
for
sola salud.
uh,
Hoy
having the
contamos con
impact
herramientas
on health.
avanzadas,
And we
como la
now have
secuenciación
advanced
genómica que nos
technology,
permite
just
entender
as
cómo virus y
genomic
bactérias
sequencing, which
cambian,
allows us
se
to study
adaptam e
how viruses
afetam
and
nuestra
bacteria
salud.
change, adapt, and
Por
affect our
ejemplo,
health.
ao
For
analisar
instance,
vírus de influenza em
in
aves silvestres, podemos
analyzing
detectar se puderam
influenza
adaptar-se e
viruses in
transmitir-se aos
birds,
seres humanos.
we were able to
Essa
prevent
informação
transmission
nos
to human
permite
beings. That
anteciparmos,
information allows
evaluar os
us
riscos,
to
prevenir a
anticipate
transmissão
risks,
e proteger
prevent
a população.
transmission, and protect
Además, a
populations.
sequenciação aplicada a
Also,
bactérias importantes nos
sequencing of
ajuda a
important
detectar a
bacteria has
resistência aos
allowed us to
antibióticos
detect
e desenhar
resistance to
estratégias mais
antibiotics
efetivas para
and develop more
combatê-las e
effective
salvar
strategies
vidas.
to combat
A mejor
disease
ciência
and
só
save
genera
lives. The
resultados se
best
guia as
science
decisões
only
sanitárias.
generates results if it's
Necessitamos
guided by
estratégias
health
claras
decisions.
para
We need
evaluar a
clear
evidência
strategies
científica
to
de maneira
avoid
rigorosa
to
e assegurar
evaluate
que se use
scientific evidence in
sistematicamente
a
em
rigorous
la
manner
toma de
and
decisões
ensure
de saúde.
that when
Tanto a
decision
ciência
making,
como os processos
we
de
take
toma
into
de
account
decisão
evidence.
basados em evidência
All
devem ser
decisions based on
transparentes,
evidence must be
respeituosos e
transparent,
responsáveis.
respectful,
La
and
confianza
responsible.
es esencial para la práctica
Trust is
científica.
essential for
Por
scientific
ejemplo, para que
practice.
las
For
personas
instance, in order
participen en
for people to be able
investigaciones
to
y para
participate
que el
in research
conocimiento sea
and so that
aportado
knowledge
social e
can
individualmente.
be
Al
used
celebrar el Día Mundial
socially
de
and
la Salud,
individually.
la
In
Organización
celebrating the
Panamericana
World
de la
Health
Salud,
Day, the Pan
OPS,
American Health
reafirma su
Organization
compromiso de
reaffirms
trabajar
its
juntos
commitment to
de
work
manera colaborativa
together
para
in a
impulsar la
collaborative
ciencia,
fashion
fortalecer
to
la confianza
improve
y
science,
garantizar que
strengthen
sus
trust, and
beneficios
ensure
lleguen
that the
a todas
benefits
las
of
personas
science
de nuestra
reach
región.
all people in our region.
Colegas, es un gusto que podamos tener esta sesión de lanzamiento del acelerador de ensayos clínicos como ocasión para la celebración del Día Mundial de la Salud. Quiero ahora invitar al doctor Ludovic Reveis, que es el jefe de la Unidad de Ciencia y Conocimiento para el Impacto, para que nos cuente los antecedentes y la visión general sobre el acelerador de ensayos clínicos de la OPS. Adelante, Ludovic.
Carla, muchísimas gracias. Espero que se vea ya mi pantalla. Bueno, y un gran saludo a cada una de las personas que se ha conectado el día de hoy, que yo considero son realmente esenciales, porque si queremos cambiar la realidad, tenemos realmente que involucrar a cada una de las diferentes personas que hacen parte, pues, del proceso. Quería empezar un poco con el tema de lo que nos enseñó COVID e incluso desde antes de COVID, y es desde hace un par de décadas venimos nosotros midiendo cómo son las características de los ensayos clínicos en la región. Y algo que es evidente, que siempre hemos visto, es que primero no hay un número muy grande de ensayos clínicos. La mayoría, el 65% de los ensayos clínicos son generalmente hechos por Brasil y más o menos el 95% de los ensayos son hechos en 8 países de la región. Entonces, digamos que ahí hay un tema sobre el cual podemos, obviamente, hacer un ejercicio para fortalecer. Por otra parte, muchos de los estudios tienden a ser estudios pequeños y con frecuentemente problemas metodológicos importantes. Entonces, durante la pandemia esto fue algo que vimos inmediatamente. Hubo un número mucho más grande de ensayos clínicos que el usual, o sea, realmente hubo una respuesta muy importante en muchos de los países, pero muchas de las instituciones iniciaron los estudios solas y no como parte de estudios multinacionales. Y muchas veces con ciertos medicamentos o intervenciones que ya se estaban llevando a cabo en otro tipo de estudios multinacionales mucho más grandes. Entonces, eso generó una repetición de una gran cantidad de los estudios. Eh, entonces, Obviamente esto llevó a que se generaran guías, orientaciones para mejorar, digamos, la calidad de los estudios, para mejorar las prioridades y nos genera obviamente la necesidad de mirar de una manera mucho más sistemática y proactiva, diría yo, esta agenda regional que teníamos pendiente. Entonces, en el 2022, perdón, gracias, digamos, con el impulso inicial de Argentina y si no estoy mal también de Perú, a nivel global una resolución sobre cómo mejorar la coordinación y la calidad de los ensayos clínicos. Y en base a esta resolución hubo una iniciativa de la OMS para apoyar, digamos, el fortalecimiento en las regiones. Y dentro de esa iniciativa nosotros organizamos un taller en Brasilia en el 2023 con el apoyo del Ministerio de Salud de Brasil, con DECID, y con la participación de varios ministerios de salud, de investigadores, bioeticistas, agencias reguladoras nacionales que participaron aquí en este evento. Y de ahí surgieron una gran cantidad de recomendaciones que de ahí iniciamos nosotros, digamos, su implementación. ¿Cuáles fueron los desafíos que se identificaron en ese momento? Primero, la cooperación y la coordinación, la necesidad de una cooperación y una coordinación entre las autoridades nacionales y las ARN. Lo segundo es obviamente una adherencia a los
Ludovic,
estándares éticos y regulatorios
disculpa que te,
internacionales.
Ludovic, disculpa que te interrumpa, pero creo que hay una confusión con la traducción. Creo que el canal, está saliendo el canal, la traducción de inglés por el canal del español.
Ya.
Entonces, te agradezco si puedes iniciar nuevamente con esta
Could you
diapositiva.
please start with
Disculpa
this
y
slide?
espero que nuestras
And I hope
intérpretes
that the interpreters
lo resuelvan entre tanto.
have
Gracias.
corrected this.
Gracias. No, entonces, bueno,
So,
como les estaba
as I was
contando,
saying,
se identificaron de la reunión varios
we
desafíos
identified at that
regionales.
meeting,
Lo
at the
primero es esta
workshop, several
cooperación y
regional
coordinación entre las
challenges. The first was
autoridades
that
nacionales y
needs to be
las
better
ARN.
cooperation and coordination between
Lo
national
segundo
authorities
es la
and
adherencia a
NRAs.
estándares
Second,
éticos y
there needs
regulatorios
to be more
internacionales, como
compliance with
vimos,
international ethical and
había
regulatory
varios
standards
problemas
because we
metodológicos,
found that there were
metodológicos
several
en varios de los
methodological
estudios
problems,
que
even
se llevaron a
ethical
cabo
problems in some of the studies
durante COVID.
that were
Y
undertaken
esto, pues
during
obviamente
COVID.
genera la
And that,
necesidad de
of
que haya
course,
mayor adherencia.
needs
El
that
otro tema
needs to
es la
be better
eficiencia
compliance.
y es
Another
que
issue
llevar a
found
cabo
was that
ensayos
efficiency.
clínicos
To carry out a
puede
clinical
llevar tiempo
trial
entre la aprobación
may
ética, la
take
aprobación
time between the
regulatoria,
ethical
la coordinación
approval,
de
the
los
regulatory
estudios,
approval, the
los
coordination of the
contratos legales
studies,
entre las
the legal
instituciones. O
contracts
sea, hay varios
established
temas
between
que son
institutions.
relacionados con
So
que
there's
podamos
quite
hacer
a
estudios mucho
few
más rápidamente
issues
y de
that could
mejor
help us
calidad. Y
do
para esto
studies
hay
more
varias
quickly
acciones,
and better
digamos, que hay
quality
que llevar a
studies.
cabo. Y estos son
And
los que
to
nos
achieve
impulsaron a
that,
este
there's several
aceleradado
actions that need
que
to
les
be
estamos
taken. That's
contando.
what led us to
Obviamente los
creating this
análisis sobre aspectos
accelerator.
jurídicos y logísticos,
There's also
este
a need
tema
to
que está clave,
standardize
que es el
legal and
establecimiento de
logistical
redes
aspects.
regionales.
And
Existen
another
algunas
important
redes
point was
para
the
temas
establishment of regional
particulares,
networks. There are
pero
some
de forma
networks for very
general
specific
no,
topics,
no
but
está
in
formalizado,
general,
digamos,
it
que
has
sean
not been
redes de ensayos clínicos
formalized
que
enough. We
aborden
don't have
diferentes temas
networks of
e
clinical trials that
instituciones
address
que
different
tengan la
topics,
capacidad de hacer
nor do we
diferentes
have
tipos de
institutions that
estudios
have the
en
capacity
diferentes
to
temas.
different
Entonces, el
kinds of studies
fortalecer
on
estas
different
redes
topics.
es
So to
esencial y
strengthen that
obviamente
network
implementar
is essential.
acciones
And finally, we
para
need
COVID
to
para
apply the
cualquiera
lessons learned from
de las que
COVID
tuvimos de COVID para
whenever
cualquier
we have
emergencia
any
futura.
future emergencies.
Entonces, se generaron 4 recomendaciones
So
importantes
four significant
en este informe que les
recommendations
comenté
came
del
out of that
2023
workshop
y en
that we
base a
had.
eso nosotros iniciamos
And
esta
so on
acelerador
the basis of that,
que
we
es una
decided to
iniciativa
develop
paraguas
this
para fortalecer la
accelerator,
eficiencia, la
which is basically
calidad,
an umbrella
la
initiative to
escala y el
strengthen
impacto de los
the
ensayos
efficiency,
clínicos en la
quality,
salud.
scale, and impact
Y
of
este
clinical
acelerador
trials in
tiene lo que
Americas.
hemos denominado,
And this accelerator has what we
diferentes
call
motores.
different
Y
drivers.
algunos de estos motores ya están
And some of these
disponibles y otros
drivers
se
are
van a
already
presentar hoy.
available, but some others
Carla va a
are going
hacer,
to be
digamos, un
presented today.
resumen de varios de estos
Carla
que
is
ya
going
están
to
disponibles.
summarize some
Hay
of
otros
the
que
engines
vamos a
that are
presentar por
available,
primera vez y que
and
van
there's
a
others
ir
that we
siendo
will be
lanzados poco
presenting
a
for the
poco
first time and will be
en el
gradually
futuro.
launched over the
¿Cuál es la
next
meta al final y
year.
por
Now,
qué
so
es
what is our
clave la
final
participación de
goal,
cada
and
uno de
why is
ustedes?
it
Bueno,
so important for
nosotros
each
tenemos
one
que
of you
cambiar
to
una realidad. Esa
participate?
realidad es
Because we have to change the
Uno,
current
que los
reality.
estudios que se hacen
And
a
that
nivel
reality is that the
multinacional
studies
usualmente son
done in
estudios que
the
vienen de
region, which
fuera de
are
la región.
multi-country,
Hay
usually are
muy
studies
pocos
that come from
estudios
outside the
iniciados en la
region.
región
There are
que
very
se
few
hacen
studies that are started within the region
multinacionales, es decir, un
that
estudio que
become
arranque en
multinational. In other
Argentina y
words,
se
a
hagan
study
4 o
that is
5 países
started
de la
by
región,
Argentina and then 4 or
no
6
es
countries in
muy
the region
frecuente
join it.
ese tipo de
That
casos.
doesn't
Entonces
occur
necesitamos
very
que los
frequently.
investigadores
So we
locales
need
lideren
to
los
have
estudios que son
local
necesarios
in
para atender
researchers
las
to lead
necesidades
the studies
de nuestra
needed to
región.
address the needs of our
Lo otro
countries.
son que existan estudios
Another goal is
multipaís.
that we need to have
Lo vimos durante
multi-country
COVID, lo
clinical
vimos
trials.
durante varias
We
otras
saw it during
emergencias
COVID
y cuando
and several
hay
other
ciertos
emergencies or
problemas que digamos
whenever there's
aparecen
certain
ciertas
problems that
necesidades.
arise.
Cada institución quiere arrancar
We
su
find that
estudio con un
each
grupo pequeño de
institution wants to
pacientes, pero
start
quiere
its
ser el que lo
own
lidera.
study
Entonces aquí
with
necesitamos
trial with
realmente
its
tener una
own group of
visión y
patients.
poder
But
hacer
here
estudios entre
we need
diferentes
to
instituciones en
try to
diferentes
develop
países iniciados por
trials
nosotros,
within different
no solo
institutions
para evitar
involving different
duplicaciones,
countries,
sino para tener
not just
mayor
to
tamaño
avoid
de muestra y
duplication,
tener
but
mayor
also to have
impacto
much larger
estadounidense.
sample and therefore have a
Las
effective
investigaciones
study.
puedan empezar
The research
rápidamente durante
also
brotes y
has to
emergencias
begin
y esto
quickly
siempre
during
ha
an
sido, digamos,
outbreak and emergencies. That has
una
always
limitación que hemos
been a
tenido, pero si tenemos,
constraint
digamos, las
on us.
regulaciones, todos los
But if we
aspectos
now
éticos,
have the
los aspectos
regulations in place, the
logísticos, los
ethical
aspectos
aspects, the
legales
logistical
resueltos,
aspects,
esto
the
es algo
legal
que
issues
podemos hacer que se
resolved,
convierta en
then it's
norma.
something that we could
Y por
do
último, los
much more quickly.
investigadores
And
puedan
finally,
conectarse y enfocarse
we
en
want to make sure
proyectos
that researchers can connect
prioritarios
and focus
de su
on
país, pero
priority
también de la
projects,
región y también
not only of their
globales
country, but the
como
region
tal.
or global.
Entonces, bueno, voy
So
a parar ahí
let
y
me
muchísimas gracias, Carla.
stop
Adelante.
here. Thank you very much, Carla. You have the floor.
Muchísimas gracias, Ludovic.
Thank you
Y voy a
very much,
continuar
Ludovic. I'm going to
contándoles sobre
continue
nuestra
to
iniciativa
tell you about our
del
initiative,
acelerador,
which is the
continuando exactamente
Clinical Trial
con lo que
Accelerator. And so
Ludovic
now I will continue with what
estaba explicando.
Ludovic
Déjenme ver
was
si,
explaining.
déjenme
And
saber
now,
si ven la pantalla.
please let me know if you can see
Si
the
ven
screen. Can you see my slides here?
Ponlo en,
ahí
sí, pero
está.
ponlo en
Yes,
Ya
could
está.
you please, yes, put it
Ok.
on
Como
presentation
decía
mode.
Ludovic,
Well, as
nuestra
Ludovic was
iniciativa del
saying,
acelerador de
our
ensayos clínicos
initiative
incluye una serie de
um,
motores.
includes
No
a
todos
series of
ellos del mismo tamaño,
engines
no
or
todos ellos
drivers. They're not the same
no todos
size.
ellos han empezado a
They're
andar a
not
la par,
all
pero básicamente
started at the
todos
same time,
buscan
but
lo mismo,
basically,
que es que
all of them
un
seek the
mayor
same thing
impacto
to
de los
have
ensayos
more
clínicos de
impact
nuestra región en la salud y el
in
bienestar de las
clinical
personas.
trials in our
Entonces,
region.
voy a contar,
So
voy a contarles sobre algunos
let me
motores
share
que
with
están,
you
que
some
han
of the
iniciado
engines
ya,
that
que
have
quizás
already
algunos conocen y
started,
otros no conocen.
gotten going, and some of
Y
you may be
quiero
familiar with some
resaltar
and
la
maybe not with others,
interrelación
but
entre
there is
estos
an
componentes.
interrelation between
El
the
que
different
todos en la
components.
región sigamos estándares
We
internacionales
should
para la
all follow
investigación
international
es algo que
standards,
facilita la colaboración. Es
and
más
that's
fácil
a
colaborar si
must
todos
because
seguimos
it's
las
easier to
mismas
collaborate if
reglas
we
del
are all
juego.
following the
Y
same
es la colaboración lo que
rules
lleva a
of the
una
game and
mayor
rules of engagement,
eficiencia.
and this collaboration leads
Entonces,
to more
uno de los,
efficiency.
quizás,
So
quizás
perhaps
una parte, un motor en sí o un aspecto de un
an
motor que
engine or a
varios de ustedes
driver
conocen
itself that
ya
many of you
desde
do know
inicios del año pasado, si
from
no
the
recuerdo
beginning
mal,
of last
es
year, if I
nuestro
remember
portal de
correctly, is
ensayos
our
clínicos de las
uh,
Américas. El
clinical
portal de ensayos
trial
clínicos está
portal of the
sirviéndonos
Americas.
como un
This portal
espacio que
is a
alberga la
space
distinta
that
información
houses
relacionada
different
a nuestra
information
iniciativa
related
paraguas
to
acelerador de
our
ensayos clínicos.
umbrella
Ah,
initiative to
al
accelerate
saber
clinical
todos
trials.
sobre los proyectos, sobre
So
los
when we
recursos,
learn
es
about
mucho más
projects and
fácil
resources
colaborar para
on this
hacer
portal, it's easier
investigación,
to
para hacer
collaborate, to
investigación
do
más
research together
eficientemente.
and do it more
Hay,
efficiently.
sin embargo, no
So
todo el trabajo que hacemos, no
so,
todos estos
however,
motores
not
tienen
all the
en la
work we
misma
do,
medida
not
una
all these
dimensión pública.
engines have
Y
a
quería
public dimension
resaltar que
to them.
parte
And
del
I wanted to
trabajo de
emphasize
esta
that part of the
iniciativa
work
es el
of
apoyo
this
directo que
initiative is
damos a los
direct
Estados
support that
miembros
we
en el
provide to
desarrollo y la
member states
revisión de las
in
normativas para
developing
investigación. Y me
standards
refiero
for
tanto
research.
a
And I am
aquellas normas
referring
que
both
buscan
to
asegurar que
norms
toda la
that
investigación
seek
con
to
seres
ensure
humanos
that
sea acorde a
research
los
with
estándares
human
éticos
beings is
y
in accordance with
a
ethical
aquellos
standards, as
reglamentos que
well as
buscan asegurar
rules and
que los ensayos
regulations
clínicos con
that seek
medicamentos y
to
dispositivos
have
que
uh,
buscan la
clinical trials
autorización
on medications and new products or devices, and which are supervised by the regulatory authorities, follow the best practices. If we follow the same rules of engagement, if we all follow international standards for this, it's not only easier to coordinate and collaborate amongst ourselves, but also with other regions in the world. So this is a basic element with PAHO, which we coordinate with our colleagues that work on quality of medications and devices. And last biennium, we developed 23 standards for countries in the region. Now we have discussed the importance of collaborating, and another component in this effort is the ethical framework for health collaboration, which we have developed, and it is already published in BMJ Global Health, maybe last year. I am not exactly remembering the dates, but it's something that has been published already. And it agrees with what Ludovico was explaining. We have seen lack of collaboration in our region, but when we emphasized the urgency to collaborate, people did not understand that it was an ethical must, and how ethical principles should be balanced. So what things are acceptable in certain situations and what sacrifices are ethically unacceptable when you're collaborating on research in health. Another element in these engines is our tool for accreditation of the research ethics committees, or RECs, and this is available in the 4 languages of the organization. We need to use the same criteria, which should be clear and transparent, and they are in agreement with the international standards and norms, and this avoids repetitions and duplications. This tool envisages 2 different kinds of accreditation according to the type of research done by a committee, and this is a contribution to efficiency, because it's not efficient to have all committees be accredited as if they were going to review clinical trial for new medicines when they are truly doing epidemiological studies. So this tool tries to get to a more dynamic, more efficient system, and I hope it will help us not only to avoid repetitions at country level, but also in the future we will be able to establish review systems at regional and international levels. So we not only need norms and standards and accreditation processes, we also need to have the capability to take these criteria into practice, to be able to implement ethical standards and also implement regulations. And we have a great deal of training regarding ethics. We have monthly seminars organized with national authorities for all the RECs in a country. We also have tools that seek to help RECs and researchers themselves to make sure that those research pieces are ethical. At regional level, this is part of our series of virtual seminars on topics related to clinical trials, where we're also trying to anticipate by identifying new topics which we as a region need to produce the knowledge needed to be up to date. in line with what Ludovic mentioned, another tool that we have produced recently, which is part of this umbrella initiative for the accelerator, is the regional model contract for clinical trials. And this was one of the most important reflections from the Brasilia workshop in 2023. Sometimes when there is an emergency, it takes longer to have a contract ready than to get the approval of the national regulatory authorities. That's why it's important to support these processes so that they are more streamlined. And so we're working on a regional process that will respond to the different norms and standards in the region that deal with with contracts, and they will facilitate that we can do multi-country trials. As Ludovic was saying, no, very few countries in Latin America and the Caribbean participate in clinical trials, only when we are invited by a country in the north. But our vision in PAHO is to be able to do a large clinical trial throughout the region, which is led by the region. And I think this tool is going to be essential to achieve this vision and in general to encourage acceleration of clinical trials in our region. And continuing with that spirit of collaboration, let me emphasize another engine which is being used it's been in use for over a year, and it is the regional forum of national entities that supervise RECs, and it has an acronym which is FRENSE. FRENSE. There was a regional workshop in Brasilia, which led also to the conclusion that spaces need to be created where those who are on the same situation in different parts of the region can reflect on lessons learned and find ways in which they can resolve certain issues. And so Friends Say, this regional forum responds to this, and they can help with this lesson learned. So this is a space where all national authorities, maybe an office that is part of the ministry, maybe a national committee if they have this function too. But all these spaces reflect and discuss on different topics that behoove them, and it is mainly a learning experience. But for PAHO, it is also key for new projects that are being launched. Many of the initiatives that will be using the different engines that will be presented by my colleagues. So all of these have derived great benefits from the regional forum, Friends Say, and also another forum which is specific for regulators. But now then, I'm going to yield the floor to Patricia Saldon, my other colleague. So I'll stop sharing now, but I would like to introduce Patricia Saidon, although you know her. She is our expert in clinical trials from the units of quality and regulation of medications and technology. Over to you, Patricia. Well, thank you so much, Carla, for giving me the opportunity to share with you the different tasks of the regional forum for clinical trials, FRENSE. I will share my screen now. So this regional forum of clinical trial regulators is made up by technical teams from the national regulatory agencies, and they participate in oversight of clinical trials for medications in the region. And this forum was created as a recommendation from a meeting of the Organization for Regulation of Medicines. So the forum seeks to encourage exchanges between experts, promote training and in-depth evaluation, and many of these things are new for experts of regulatory agencies, and they need the opportunity to be able to be trained and go in depth in these topics, and also discuss implementation of these new topics within the regulatory agencies themselves, and ultimately to do analyses of the sub-indicators of the regulatory function of oversight of clinical trials, which appear in the global tool for assessing in national regulatory agencies. So what is this tool? This world tool, this global tool of the WHO is a tool that allows people to analyze systematically what regulatory systems are doing in terms of performance, and thus identify the strengths, but also detect the areas which require strengthening for each one of the functions, and also develop institutional development efforts that allow gaps to be closed in certain areas that need improvement, and be able to do follow-up regarding the results of the plans that were implemented. A central element of the tool is that it incorporates the concept of maturity levels, whereby it is possible to rate using different criteria with that go in maturity from 1 to 4. The tool includes indicators. In the case of clinical trials, there are 6 indicators with 30 sub-indicators for the different maturity levels. There are 9 regulatory functions, and clinical trials is one of them, or oversight of clinical trials is one of those functions. So what activities did the forum carry out since its inception a couple of years ago up to date? Well, let me tell you that the forum is currently made up of 75 members participating from 15 countries in the region, from the national authorities, regulatory authorities. They have monthly activities that do exchanges of critical elements that are inherent in the regulatory function for clinical trials. And there was a survey to see what indicators and sub-indicators were harder to implement. And according to the responses, they were assigned priority. And so the sub-indicators that were defined through the survey as having more gaps for their implementation. So that happened through the survey. And there's also performance indicators derived from this. Let me also share with you that into the future, the forum has envisaged to create two subgroups to create harmonized documents for something that is a priority for oversight of clinical trials. First is the ones that happen during health emergencies, and especially using pre-approved or framework protocols, establishing a necessary protocol for evaluating and following these protocols, including also monitoring in real time to process data quickly and to lead to necessary amendments. Also, it's in charge of assessing development of protocol frameworks according to pathogens and also define acceptable designs according to data, quality data that are required for emergencies, discussing strategies to be able to quickly deploy these strategies during an outbreak so that they can be quickly implemented.
The second group has to do with something that's also necessary in the case of an emergency and also for all sorts of oversight activities, and that is to discuss the reliance on different aspects of the clinical trials functions. We have a site in the forum's website, in the portal, the clinical trials portal, and this portal is one you can visit. The forum, the site includes PAHO's technical documents, WHO technical documents, NIH, and other documents that relate to clinical trials. And there is a specific site for the clinical trial members where we have the meetings of the meetings, the presentations, the discussions that took place, and other documents that pertain to the members' activities. So that is all. Thank you for your attention.
Muchas gracias a ti, Patricia.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you very much for having shared this information. And now I'd like to call on somebody who knows a lot, my colleague, Fran Carrocedo of the Regional Program on Bioethics at PAHO. And Sarah Carrocedo will be presenting a different engine, which is the Dashboard on Indicators of National Research Ethics Systems. Go ahead, Sarah. Thank you, Carla. I will be describing what this dashboard is on indicators of national research ethics systems. But before I share my screen, I'd like to give you some background on why we prepared this dashboard and the specific indicators that were included, how we tried to develop ethics indicators. The effort went back to 2018 when member states assessed the progress that had made in the ethics of research and just highlighted that it was very important to continue system focus. The regional bioethics program therefore developed the indicators, and they were published in 2021, and at the same time, between 2020 and 21, the first evaluation of 22 countries took place to determine whether they had met these indicators or not. This first evaluation, which we call the baseline, was published in 2022 in Lancet. And then, since then, we've continued evaluating different countries every so often and assessing them to determine if the challenges still exist and develop specific plans of action that help them attain the indicators and ensure that the research takes place in an ethical manner. After having developed the baseline, the later assessments have been communicated to the member states and the different stakeholders involved in the research and have also been published in the web pages of the Regional Bioethics Program, as well as in the clinical trials portal. So, given this framework, that's what led to developing this dashboard of indicators so that we could have a visual picture, a more attractive visualization, and a more user-friendly website that's easier to navigate, and also to be able to promote these evaluations and the results that have been obtained, and of course, promote transparency in these evaluations that have taken place in the countries. So this is a very useful engine because it shows you, it sheds light on the indicators, and it acknowledges the progress that some countries have made since the first assessment to date. And before I go into the dashboard, I wanted to mention that although when this was under construction, it was presented on several occasions to Francais. The original one was different, and after comments made by Francais, changes have been made to make this dashboard much more useful for the various users. So this is the first view of the dashboard, which the first page tells you how the indicators were developed, how it's organized. In this page here, you can see, which one of the first pages you'll see the results of the baseline and the current situation, the current status for how much progress countries have been made in implementing each one of the 6 indicators. So you can see which countries are in the accomplished level or completed, or they're still undertaking the process or have not even begun. You can also select a country, for instance, Bolivia. Let's say you choose Bolivia. You can see the specific information on the indicator and where they stand. These regulations are the basis that lead us to score them as to whether they have started the process or not yet. The next slide shows you progress made in the indicators. There's some countries that we work with very closely to develop regulations, and they may be in the process of being approved in some cases. So what we're trying to show here in this table is what is the status of the country in complying with the indicators. If the country has already approved the regulations or is in the process of approving them, whether they will finally approve them or not. As you can see, that there are many more countries achieved or attained compared to the initial evaluation. Here's another version where you can see the baseline, the current status, and projections, what they expect. For instance, the baseline, there's only 7 countries, so we can go from 11 to 18. If you look at the current status, which is the latest evaluation, you can see here that what countries by indicator have complied. If you leave your cursor here, you can see which country is in that status. If you leave your cursor on the green, then you'll see the countries that appear there. And in this next to last slide, it goes by country. Let's say we choose Argentina. You'll see the current status, the current regulations. There is section on what each indicator where they are, and then a link on the far right that leads you to the specific regulations so that you can read it and everyone is informed about it. This is interesting because, for instance, in this graph on the right, you can see how far along in compliance the country is in terms of that indicator. And finally, in the last slide, you have the current situation of the country by indicator. Let's say the legal instrument indicator I wanted to look at. I can see where they are in terms of compliance, what countries are, and if I put my cursor on a country, it tells me where that country stands, where it is in terms of compliance. This dashboard, you can look at it to get results, to see what progress countries have made, to see what challenges have been made, to do comparisons at the regional level. And I hope that it will also be useful for all users from your different perspectives and roles. Before concluding, though, I'd like to add two more things. One is that we're currently working on the sub-indicators to these indicators so that we can capture in greater detail the progress that has been made and the challenges that still exist in the countries in the area of research ethics. For instance, under indicator 1, on the existence of legal instruments to do research on human beings, we want to see sub-indicators under this to determine whether it's research with children, to see if it complies with international standards, international ethical standards, whether the research on pregnant women also complies with international standards. That's what we're working on now, the sub-indicators for each one of the indicators. And finally, before I run out of time, this engine, as Carla was saying, is interconnected to Francais, but has also served as the basis for the next motor that Adriel is going to explain. Because when you look at the regulatory picture, you are better able to identify the standards. So, but I'm not going to focus on that. Let me highlight what Carla said at the very beginning. That is that this dashboard is not an isolated product. Instead, it's interconnected, it's linked to other engines so that we can all achieve the goals of this big initiative, which is the Accelerator on Clinical Trials. So with this, I thank you for your attention. Thank you, Sara. As you said, these initiatives are all interlinked, interrelated, and we all hope that they will lead to greater transparency and collaboration in clinical trials in the region. Now, I am pleased to introduce Adriel Reutemann, another colleague in the Bioethics regional program. He's also a legal advisor in the Ministry of Health in Buenos Aires, and he's going to present another engine, which has yet not been made public, but we are hoping it will soon be public. But it's a new innovative project we've been working on. Go ahead, Adriel. Thank you, Carlos, for the presentation. Good afternoon to all of you. For me, it's always a pleasure to participate in these meetings. And today I'm double interested because I'm going to introduce a tool we've been working on for some time, which is a tool following Sarah's line of thinking. It can't be seen in an isolated way. It's an opportunity. We started with the model of the regional contracts in the intention of democratizing and making everything that has to do with legal aspects in health research more accessible. And the challenge here was to compile all the rules, regulations in the region and try to see how we could make them accessible to everyone, streamline them, everybody can understand them, access them, and benefit from that information to carry out projects in the region under this clinical trials accelerator we've been working on. So let me share my screen now. This is the platform on regulatory information in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's still a prototype. That's not the final name, but that's the name we've given it for the moment, RegLac, to identify it. But the idea was to try to find a user-friendly way of accessing information different from the traditional way, which is usually a document with all the information about a country in each page. Or what I decided to do was try to find a more modular way of presenting this information so that you could interrelate things and understand it better. So let me show you what this platform involves. This is a compilation of the regulations of 22 countries, the ones that have participated indicators that Sarah mentioned. They are the countries that do most of the health research in the region. And then there's three ways of accessing content. One is by country. So you can click on a country search engine or in an interactive way on the map. For instance, let's choose Argentina. And it's structured where you have general information for each country. You can find out who is the regulatory agency, the contact of the web, and the contact person. And then there's 34 questions and answers that covers 6 main topics. So the way we show the content is in 3 different spaces with a direct answer to the question, a very concise answer, an additional explanation. And here it says the source, where this information comes from. And every time, every response has information with the content and then the link to the document, the official source. And we also try to identify which article, which subparagraph covers this information to make your search easier and faster. So as I was saying, there's 34 questions and answers that are structured on the basis of a system. There's a set of more general questions. Then there's a second set of questions that involve more the role. Skipping around just so you can see how it works in each case. There are questions that have to do with the requirements for starting a trial, what kinds of presentations there are, what mechanisms, what kind of rates you need to include, at what moment does the ethics committee intervene? Does it intervene before or after the regulatory agency? Because we know that each country has its unique form of doing this. And usually research is characterized by very different rules and regulations, usually ministerial regulations or it's oversight agencies regulations. And this is intended to help you develop a method for this in your countries. There's another set on good manufacturing practices, imports, labeling. There are questions on how you conduct and close a study, the amendments that have to be made, the follow-up, and what happens once the study has been completed. Questions on post-study access, and then there's a set of 4 questions that have to do with more specific points outside the clinical centers, such as regulations, personal data, vaccinations, biological samples, and whether there are rules and regulations and other types of clinical trials. And finally, in each country, there's a set of links to all the rules mentioned in that. So if you want to just look at that, you access that. And then there's also a link to the official forms and to any guides or official instructions. We felt this could be done in an interactive way. You can also click and report a PDF report with a complete report like the one you see here with all the links that are functional. There are other 2 ways of looking at the content. I think it's quite interesting because it allows you to do very rich conclusions, and it allows you to compare in each question. Let's say you want to know what the different systems say about post-study access, post-trial access. Here you can see in an orderly fashion what each country says and whether there is any provision or not about this. Just black and white questions. If you also want to go into depth, you can look at the details, and then you can see under each country an additional explanation. So for each one of the questions, that it can be answered by yes or no. And then finally, there's another functionality, another way of providing the information, which is through a filter, where say all the questions where the answer is yes, what countries comply with that? For instance, say you want to find countries where the approval by the committee must occur before the regulatory authority does so, and or whether you want to have compensation or insurance for participants, or does the country have a system for the protection of personal data? On the basis of those 3 criteria, you look for countries, and the platform gives you information on those countries that meet those 3 requirements. And then you click and you go to the country's information, and as I showed you earlier, you start all over again.
So essentially, this is still a prototype, and we will be sharing links so that everybody can use it. And to conclude then, this was started as an initiative thinking of the sponsors who want to do multi-center trials from initiatives that come from the region. I think this platform will be a very useful tool for all of us who are either researchers who need to know information about the country, or also the authorities, the regulatory authorities, to use it as a benchmark. And ultimately, this information is very useful for those who want to start doing research in the region and haven't started yet. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm here if you have any questions. Thank you very much, Adriel. And this is a new initiative, which we hope will soon become widespread and be made public. We always have had the support of the both FRENSE and also the Regional Forum for Regulators. Now I'm going to welcome Tiago Hernandez Rocha, and he works in the Department of Evidence for Health Action, and he will share with us another new product, which is an important engine to accelerate clinical trials. And I think it is revolutionary to encourage collaboration and prioritization of research efforts in the region. Over to you, Tiago. Thank you very much, Carla. Can you see my screen? It's a pleasure to be here.
colegas traductores. Bien, voy a presentar
I am going
brevemente una
to
iniciativa
present
que estamos
briefly an
desarrollando para el
initiative that
tema
we
de
are
horizon scanning.
developing for
Entonces, nosotros desde el
what we
Departamento
call
PH
the
tenemos desarrollado herramientas para
horizon
apoyar
scanning. So we have
el monitoreo,
tools to
the horizon scanning monitoring using artificial
a
intelligence. One of
cambio.
these tools is related to an ecosystem of decision making and is based on a framework that we call RAG. RAG is an acronym for Retrieval Augmented Generation. And this is a system that connects a large language model with tools. And what is considered as a tool? A tool can be a database, a group of files, an application programming interface that will provide for you structured information regarding one specific matter, or sensors or gadgets that can connect vital information and other data that can be useful for you to perform an analysis. And a RAG systems is organized around this logic. So starting with the user input, you provide a question that you want. An artificial intelligence agent will interact with the tools that are available and connected to this agent, doing requests and getting information. And once the agent got all the information that is needed to provide a robust answer for you, the agent will design the answer and present to the end user. This structure, this framework, is extremely powerful for you to handle fragmented databases. A lot of the effort that we have behind the horizon scanning, it's exactly related to this type of situation. We have the regulatory information that are in different registers from the countries. We have the pharmacovigilance. We have the information regarding the clinical trials. We have the information regarding the applications of drugs, the status of approval. So this framework of RAG can help us to design solutions to compile information that is fragmented, organize this information, and provide a structured report for the user. So as is right now, we are working to accomplish this following scenario. So a user will have a platform that you can just highlight. Okay, I'd like to know what are the innovations regarding the non-small cell lung cancers at stage 3 trials and stage 3 immunotherapy trials. And the system can, with the user only providing this guidance, identify what is the drug safety profile, bibliometric analysis regarding the drugs, the trial landscape, regulatory intelligence, funding trends, translate all this information, evaluate going back to the past up to 15 years or 10 years to get all the information that is needed to create this scenario. And once the AI agent system is organized, he can use this information to produce for the end user a report. And this report can have sections regarding the molecules, the global and regional activity maps, sponsors, and so on. As is right now, we are able to accomplish a pipeline that has 9 steps that is fully automated and based on AI solutions to create a horizon scanning. So basically, by providing information regarding the condition, the year, and the number of trials, the AI solution that we have is capable to do a horizon scanning for whatever the disease you are interested in 40 minutes. Usually in the past, the effort to compile a horizon scanning initiative used to take like months. So as is right now, we are able to get everything regarding the trials information, the trials characterization, metadata, inclusion criteria, interventions, drugs. We are able to get the targets, eventually using also drug synonyms, so you can identify the multiple names of one specific drug that they are correlated. The AI solution is gathering all the information regarding the regulatory information from FDA, EMA, NICE, biomarkers, standardized information regarding the drugs, creating a corpus that is fed into an additional step that is capable to extract information from the scientific literature to create a prioritization score. This prioritization score is used for us to highlight what drugs are considered as innovative for one specific condition. This is one example of the outputs that we are able to get. So from a universe of almost 2,000 drugs, we are able to identify, in this case for lung cancer, we're able to identify 81 drugs that are considered as of major interest and 36 that are considered as innovative, which means drugs and types of treatments that are coming and they are promising in terms of the results that they're getting during the development phase. For each one of the drugs, we're able to identify the trials phase, the distribution through time, and also an evaluation that is highlighting for us when we have the first chemical component name and when we have the first commercial name. So this standard here is highlighting for us that this substance went from chemical component to market in 1 year. And if we have a patent like this one more recently, we're able to identify that this is something that is promising for this specific condition, for this specific situation. So the output are a prioritization score that you have for each one of the drugs, of the trials, the regulatory information, the indication of what is the main the key element regarding each one of the drugs considered as a priority. And we have a fully automated report. So this small video here is highlighting the categories that we are able to get using this AI solution. The report that you are seeing on the left was fully generated using AI and compiling databases and compiling data for more than 20 databases regarding what is the level, what is the status of the strategic introduction of these mechanisms. An executive summary that is providing a synthesis of the trial information. What was the methodology used to create the report? What we use to scope and normalization so we can define the same names for drugs and for the different approach regarding the diseases. Everything regarding the trial silos. A table comparing the drugs. Everything regarding the regulatory information. Everything the table to get regarding pharmacovigilance. Evidence regarding efficacy. The status of the innovation priority score that is basically highlighting from the universe of drugs that we are able to identify which ones are considered the most innovative or most promising. Eventually, data gaps and mitigation strategies that were used to get the information that we are presenting and all the references and methods that we are able to compile for this specific horizon scheme. We are covering all of these steps in 40 minutes for whatever disease you can imagine that it was addressed by a trial. And this is just the beginning. And we are working to incorporate additional layers to this. So you can have these data sets that are produced to feed this report available for you to perform additional analysis or explore further possibilities. And our idea is to work together to incorporate additional features to this tool. And our main objective is to expedite the process between a knowledge discovery and the implementation and the start of use of innovative solutions to addressing health challenges. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Tiago. Como pueden ver, hay mucho entusiasmo.
Thank you, Tiago. As you can see, there is a great deal of enthusiasm regarding these new resources that we have. Some are just getting started, some haven't started yet. And now I would like to invite Dr. Or people with different perspectives, and we will invite them to share their different perspectives, for example, from the perspective of the researchers. So we have Dr. Pedro Can. He is the person we are inviting now to speak from that standpoint. Thank you very much for your invitation. It's great to be here. My name is Pedro Can. I am glad to participate in this initiative. everything that helps us to further research is important. We are in difficult situations, beginning with my country, where basic research is not easy. Our researchers have undergoing very difficult situations. The labor force has been cut considerably, and the pay is not good either. So it is important that we can work on this. We need to include among the things that PAHO can do is to convince the whole healthcare teams of how important research is. Research helps healthcare so that research is done well according to international standards. As was mentioned here, what we need are source documents that are traceable, that are readable, that have no margin of error. And if they have any mistakes, they will be evident. And so this helps people who are providing the healthcare. Research is the basis for good healthcare. We need to also promote the youth to be a researcher. The first resource you need is to be curious, to ask yourself a lot of questions. As doctors or members of the healthcare team, we can apply information generated by third parties, or we can also help generating knowledge. And let me share the experience of my agency. We do studies for new medicines. We cannot modify the protocol. It's just take it or leave it. We can barely modify the content of the informed consent form. So I like the studies that are initiated by the researchers, and we can also cooperate with the INC from Canada, the National Institutes of Health in the United States, and we also have collaborations with France and Spain. These are more flexible studies where we can participate in their promotion. We can right now have a track record of 8,500 patients who have gone through different clinical trials, and our foundation is an NGO. It does not belong to the public sector, but we have working with several hospitals so that medical care is accessible to all. I think the engines that have been shown here, the consolidated engines, can be significant tools as long as their implementation reaches or their application reaches the public clinics and other places where healthcare is provided. Thank you for the opportunity and for inviting me. Thank you, Pedro. I think your comments highlight what I think is a new paradigm, how we see research. It is not a distraction because it is through research that we can find solutions and to health problems. And the more we do research in our region, the more we will grow and find solutions to health problems in our region. Now, I'm going to welcome Dr. Adriana Zacarias from DINAVISA. DINAVISA is the National Regulatory Agency in Paraguay. and she is responsible for clinical trials in her country. Over to you, Adriana. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Carla, for all the presentations. It is a real pleasure for me to be able to share my perspective from the regulatory agency, specifically my own, Dina Visa. This initiative that is being launched by PAHO, we can say that it is very useful to help us close many of the gaps we used to have in research and in clinical trials in Latin America and the Caribbean. Because the main objective of this project from PAHO is not only to do more research, but it is to transform the operational regulatory systems in our region with the purpose of improving impact and efficacy of clinical trials. And there's value added from the regulatory standpoint is having health sovereignty. We are always trying to strengthen local capacity and to gather and systematize regulations and standards in each country. We need to strengthen planning and carrying out of clinical trials. We need to all be on the same page, speak the same language in terms of research and facilitate research and provide a quick response, especially in emergency situations, by creating an ecosystem which is robust for clinical trials. I also wanted to say that as I was listening to the different explanations about the engines and the work PAHO has done, this challenge hasn't been easy for our agencies, our regulatory agencies, because implementing these projects face a main barrier, which is the structural barrier. It goes way beyond science. The regulatory level was significant as a challenge.
Because not all our countries had the level of maturity of the regulatory agencies. Also, we saw that each country had its own rules, its own regulations. Some were more complex, others were much less complex. And so that prevented clinical trials from being designed for the entire region and prevented them from being approved more quickly. And we therefore sometimes lost competitiveness, unlike other countries in the region. But as a member of the Regional Forum on Clinical Trials, which made an effort, and as a result of the continuous support that we've received from PAHO in all of those agencies that are part of this, it's thanks to this support, we have been able to have regulations today that are well-defined and standardized at the highest level and are even harmonized with the international regulations. So what we've tried to do through this is to develop other strategies for strengthening us so as to have greater impact on the part of those various motors that lead to good clinical trials. Because what we want to finally have is regulatory convergence. We've seen that very often the biggest bottleneck is often the disparity that exists between countries on their regulations. So by this project, through this project, and by strengthening it, we have created a preferential path which we are accelerating through using these various engines. And in each one of our agencies, we recognize that maybe an agency that has less capacity can base itself on the decisions made by another authority that has regional reference points, so as to avoid duplicating efforts. And as others said, in the case of multicentric justified protocols, in the future, the dream would be to have one single protocol, so that one single protocol is submitted simultaneously to all the countries in the region. And in that way, we would be able to be more competitive at the regional level and reduce months of bureaucracy, of red tape. The intention is to create more engines and accelerate clinical trial implementation, so as to be able to close the quality and efficacy circles. One thing that I think the PAHO could implement is perhaps an observatory of all the priorities of the region. This would be sort of a system that could map all the diseases, neglected diseases in the region. And that way we could offer researchers or encourage them to focus in these areas when they do clinical trials. So to summarize a bit, we think that the success of this project pushed by PAHO in the area of clinical trials, the reason for success is that it has strengthened mutual trust and confidence between the various countries in the region. And by strengthening that, we hope it'll become definitive, so that when a project led by PAHO is no longer seen as a project outside or external to PAHO, but rather the backbone of our own research, so that all of us who are involved in clinical trial research can become members of this Latin American Caribbean network. So we need to strengthen and continue to move forward. And I'd like to express my appreciation for all the effort made and all the accomplishments that have been made by PAHO in this area and in Paraguay and Dinavisa in Paraguay. On behalf of them, I'd like to thank you for the continuous support you've given us throughout the whole process. Thank you very much. Thank you, Adriana. We in PAHO would like to congratulate Paraguay on the great progress it has made in increasing research in oversight of clinical trials and in establishing a national research system that complies with the highest standards we have available. We know that's not an easy task, and it's work that we always carry out hand in hand with the countries, and it's part of a regional effort. So thank you very much for reminding us of the importance of moving from heterogeneity, from everybody doing things their own way, to convergence, trust, and support we can give one another. Now it's a pleasure for me to welcome Dr. Francisca Rodriguez. She is a long-term collaborator with PAHO. She's located in Chile, but today she is with us representing FIFARMA. As you know, FIFARMA is the Latin American Federation of the Pharmaceutical Industry that works and cooperates with the Pan American Health Organization. Go ahead, Francisca. Thank you, Carla, for the invitation to speak about such a relevant and important topic. I was looking at some of the projects that are under the Clinical Trials Accelerator, and I can see that we've seen some very important progress made. When you look at the platform of indicators and the strengthening of national systems of ethics and research, we can see through the indicators and comparing it to the baseline, how much progress has been made today, how much countries have been strengthening their regulations thanks to the work you've been doing with them for years. I also congratulate you because anxious to see these new projects on regulatory information in Latin America and the Caribbean be published, and also the horizon scanning, which are innovative and very relevant projects for anybody who works in research. Let me start by saying, why do we do this? Why is the work done by PAHO and the work each one of us does in research, in clinical research, so important? And some have mentioned in their presentations that it's because we do this for our patients, where we can create opportunities to have better science, improve medication, have better health technology to improve the health of people, and to have early access to innovation, particularly when there's no other type of treatment available. That's what happens a lot in Chile and probably a lot of countries in the region, where the pharmaceutical industry often gets questions about the possibility of doing a clinical trial to access a therapy that's not available in the country in any other way. That's where you see how important it is to improve and increase the availability of clinical trials in each one of the countries in Latin America. But not only that, it also allows us to strengthen our hospital capacities. It allows us to develop more talent, increase skills, improve care, and it attracts investment and therefore greater economic development. And finally, how do we ensure that? How can we ensure that we have more clinical trials? How we improve care? How do we improve the health of people? It's through the 3 points you, Carlos, made about the Clinical Trials Accelerator, where we need to have greater efficiency, better quality, and greater impact. And we can't think that by being more efficient, we're going to lose quality. I think we have to work on the 3 at the same time, and I think that's very relevant. And I congratulate you for that, because all of these projects will help break down the fragmentation, eliminate the fragmentation that exists in countries and within countries in terms of regulations and in the development and implementation of clinical trials. So if we can develop a common language, we have shared indicators, we can do comparisons between countries by having common indicators, then it has very relevant impact. And we've seen how that has helped to strengthen clinical research in the region. I hope that we move from a participation of only 5% of clinical trials worldwide to a much higher percentage of participation. But there's still some challenges that we need to address, and where we need to work on in a collaborative basis. In each of this panel, we have each one of the sections of clinical research represented, and we need to try to work together. We need, therefore, institutional and political support to move forward. That's what we've seen happen in the countries that are much more advanced in clinical research in Latin America. Brazil, for instance, Argentina, Mexico, Chile, Colombia, which are the countries where there's the most research and clinical trials take place. What we've seen in those countries that have made that advance is that there was the political will on the part of the government to move forward in this area and strengthen the research structure and system. And so that's a challenge each one of us has in trying to raise the flag and show that research is relevant. It does have impact on people. It does have impact on the health of people, on the quality of our healthcare system, and an impact on the economy as well. And I think the panelist that preceded me mentioned this. She said one of the relevant barriers is the structural barrier. And we've seen that. We see that in each one of the institutions that implements clinical trials in our countries, because part of the role of the regulatory agency, it doesn't have all the necessary resources to perform in an optimal manner all the processes that have to take place to approve a clinical trial and to provide follow-up to that trial. So one of the challenges that we've been talking about amongst ourselves in Chile, what challenges is the role that regulatory agencies have in the area of health and in the ability they have to have impact on health research from the economic perspective. So they may be given more capacities, more resources, so that they can do that work in the best way possible and allow them to move towards the local development of new technologies in each one of our countries. Second, we need to establish clear priorities. Governance cannot be fragmented. So all of these projects that you're doing, one to strengthen the national ethics systems, and the projects on the regional forum for regulators, and the one on developing indicators for Latin America and the Caribbean, how is it that we can have a common point between these different stakeholders so that we can strengthen and improve our coordination and discussion mechanisms, and therefore develop partnerships? We've seen, for instance, very often many countries are beginning to implement, and also based on the countries that have been successful in this, what's important is for have all the stakeholders together to meet and around the table and define what needs to be done to achieve better efficiency, better quality, and better impact on the part of clinical trials. So one of the challenges, how do you have these projects interact so that they can coordinate with one another? I have a lot of things written down. Another point, and I always mention this, if we think of why are we doing this, we also have to measure, are we achieving what we want to achieve? Are we achieving efficiency, quality, and impact? And so I know the panelists who preceded me mentioned this about efficiency. One of the relevant barriers that prevent us from having more clinical trials in the countries is the length of time it takes for a clinical trial to be approved in a country. So when we talk about efficiency, we need to avoid duplicity, avoid processes that do not need reliance, as one of the presenters said, that yeah, joint and parallel presentation to ethics committees and regular committees, regulating committees. How do we encourage that, and how do we develop indicators so that, as Adriel showed, regulators on regulatory information for Latin America and the Caribbean, we also need to have time indicators. How long is it taking for a country to approve? How long does the regulatory agency take? How long does the ethics committee take? How many patients are participating in the clinical trials? Are they benefiting from these clinical trials, etc.? And when talk about quality, and we want to have an impact based on quality, we have to measure amongst the indicators, we must measure the satisfaction of the people who are participating in these clinical research trials. The perception of participating in a clinical trial through a survey allows us to determine whether all these improvements that we've made are actually having an impact or are being perceived by those who participate in research, and therefore promote and make sure that the research centers do surveys of their patients to measure their views of the clinical trial. And finally, the effect on patients' health and the economy should be measured. It should be measured through the patients who are benefiting from this. So I probably got over my time allotment, but I'd like to thank you for having invited me and the opportunity to speak. And I think that the major progress we've made so far, and I'm sure these indicators are going to show great accomplishment. So thank you, Carla. Thank you, Francisca. And thank you for highlighting what we always say at PAHO, which is part of our mission, that research is a part of a system. It doesn't work to move forward in just one thing, in ethic policies, or just in research, or in the investigator, or in the institution, or the regulatory agency. We have to include everyone because everyone has a role. And if we don't see how we can collaborate, we are not going to meet our goal to be better, have better quality, and have greater impact in clinical trials. So now our last panelist is Dr. Victor Almeida from the Ministry of Health of Ecuador. He is part of the management and research and is responsible for the oversight of the ethics and research committees.
Buenas tardes con todos y todas. Muchas gracias, Carla.
Thank you and good day to everyone. Thank you, Carla. The tools that you have presented to us today are incredible. I think these tools have great potential to encourage and enhance research in the region. I think everyone here must keep in mind that as a region, what we all want to achieve is to encourage ethical research and collaborative research, as Carla was saying, and research that has impact, high impact on patients. And to do this, we need to encourage clinical trials, because trials not only generate evidence, but are also an opportunity to be innovative in health for our patients. So we need to keep that in mind as well. And the tools that have been presented by you are going to help us develop research that's based on evidence and ethically correct research done in the best way possible. I think the tools that have been developed so far and exist in PAHO for some time, and the ones that you're working on now are going to help us to further develop research in the region, do clinical trials, and make sure that these trials are well received, not only by the patients, but also by the researchers. I do think these are going to be crucial tools, particularly the tool that you were talking about, the dashboard on indicators. I think that's going to be very helpful for those of us who are involved in regulations and in strengthening health governance. I think it's essential to identify those areas where we are strong points or areas where we have weaknesses and need to improve. And it helps us because it allows us to see what our neighboring country has done, what they did, or what initiative they worked on. And it allows us to compare regulations in the region and therefore work together with others and move forward.
The regional bioethics program is of great help, especially for us in Ecuador. It has been great encouragement. It has helped us a great deal in preparing standards, and it has also encouraged us to strengthen what we call here the ecosystem of bioethics committees in our country. Congratulations to all of you for this work. It has a great deal of potential, and it will be a great tool for all of us, for researchers, for regulatory agencies, and one way or another, this will help promote
ética, colaborativa
research,
y de alto impacto aquí en la
collaboration,
región.
ethical research, which will have great impact here
Muchas
in our
gracias,
region. Thank you very
Víctor.
much,
Muchas
Victor.
gracias también por tus
Thank
contribuciones
you for
constantes
your
en
constant
Francés y a los proyectos
contributions in
regionales.
Francais
Quiero
and
ahora
to regional
invitar a mis
projects. Now
colegas
I would like to
PESE que han
ask
presentado
my
los motores,
colleagues
a
from
Patricia,
PAHO,
Sara, a
Patricia,
Adriel y a
Sara,
Tiago,
Adriel,
a unirse
Tiago,
nuevamente ante
to
sus cámaras, porque quiero
come on camera
específicamente
because I
invitarlos
wanted to
si bien el tiempo es justo, quiero invitarlos a que compartan alguna
I
reacción,
wanted to
algún
ask them
comentario que
to
tuvieran
share some
luego de
comments,
haber
some
escuchado las
reactions
reflexiones de
after
nuestro
listening to
panel.
the
No sé quién quiere
presentations of our
tomar la palabra.
panelists.
Creo que esta
I don't
es
know who would
una
like to
conversación,
speak now.
pero
I think
adelante, por
this
favor.
could be a
Tiago, te veo
dialogue.
con el micro abierto.
So, Tiago, go
Gracias,
over
Carla.
to you.
No, yo
Yes,
creo que
thank
hay
you,
mucho
Carla.
desarrollo en la
I
región,
think a
entonces
lot
lo
is
que se
going on,
presentó
and
obviamente nos
what was presented
genera muchas
here
ideas y toca ahora
is
explorar las
generating a
diferentes
great deal of
posibilidades
ideas. And so we
económicas,
needed to now explore
disponibles nos pueden
how
ayudar.
the
Entonces yo
available
creo que, por
tools
ejemplo,
can guide us.
todo el tema, y
So I think, for
del tema,
example,
por ejemplo, de la iniciativa de los colegas que están
the
mapeando los registros
initiative
nacionales de los
of the
ensayos
colleagues
clínicos.
that are
Estos son
mapping
informes
out
personales porque el
the
tratamiento nos
registries of
permite
clinical
identificar
trials.
fuentes
This is
anónimas
wonderful
o
because we
fuentes
can
adicionales de información que pueden, por ejemplo,
identify
mejorar la
additional
representación para
sources of
efectos de
information to
concluirse de fase
improve
clínica. Y
what is
así
going
que
on in terms of clinical
es
trials.
una
So
excelente oportunidad para conocer
this
las
is an
distintas
excellent
iniciativas.
opportunity to learn about the different
Eh,
initiatives.
Creo que
I
si
think
trabajamos
that
conjuntamente
if
podemos
we work
escalar y
jointly,
perfeccionar los
we will be
productos que
able
presentemos para
to
que tengamos la
improve
mejor
the
calidad,
products
mejor
that
alimento
we
científica
are
disponible
introducing so that they are
para
more
todos.
useful
Y
to
lo más
everyone.
fundamental, yo creo que todos
I think
tenemos
the
una
most
misma
essential
idea, es
thing
que
is that
cómo se
we
puede acelerar
all
la utilización de
coincide
las
on the
herramientas que están
same
disponibles en los
point,
ensayos
which is
clínicos
how
para que
can
eso
we
se
make all the
pueda
information
convertir
available
en
that
iniciativas
exists
concretas. Entonces, todos
on
tenemos como
clinical trials
necesario
so that this can be
director
used
detrás de
concretely
todo
in
lo que estamos
practical ways. So
desarrollando,
behind all that
seguramente
we
los nuevos
are
productos
developing
ofrecen muchas
and
nuevas
the different
posibilidades para que
products
podamos trabajar
offer new
conjuntamente y
possibilities
acelerar la
for joint
incorporación de
work
nuevas
and so
tecnologías
that
para la
we
región.
can accelerate
Gracias,
the work
Tiago.
and
Y en
improve health.
relación a lo
Thank
que
you, Tiago.
algunas
And
personas están preguntando
some
cuándo va a
people
estar
were
disponible.
asking
Estamos
themselves,
trabajando
when
para que
are these
aquellas
things
piezas
going
que
to
no
be
están
available?
disponibles aún
Well, we're
estén
working hard
disponibles lo
so
más rápido
that
posible,
things
tal
will
manera que
be
todos
ready,
puedan
that all pieces are
sacarle el mayor
movement and
provecho.
coordinated,
Créanme que nosotros
articulated,
somos
so
los más
that
ansiosos
everyone
de
can
poner
start
todos estos
using these
trabajos a
tools. We are
disposición de
anxious
ustedes.
for all of
Patricia,
this to
creo que
be
podrías comentarnos
available to you
algunas
as soon as possible.
reflexiones
Patricia, I think you had
en relación a
some
los ensayos
reflections
clínicos.
regarding clinical trials
No,
over.
decir que
Well,
estas
I
son
just wanted to say
herramientas
that these are
que tocan,
tools
que
that
digamos que no son las únicas, porque viendo en el chat
I
hay
mean,
algunas,
they are
sino que
not the
buscan
only ones that
fortalecer
exist,
distintos ángulos
but they help
que hacen al
strengthening different
fortalecimiento de la
areas
capacidad
to
regional
strengthen the
en torno a
overall
los ensayos
regional
clínicos.
capacity regarding clinical
Entonces,
trials.
en el caso
So,
de
in the case
el foro de
of
ensayos clínicos, este foro
clinical
se
trials,
formó
this
como
the
un foro de
forum
reguladores para
was
justamente
created as
tender a
a
fortalecer las capacidades que
regulators
hay en la
forum
región para la fiscalización
with
de
the
aquellos
view
ensayos
to
clínicos que van a dar
strengthening
lugar
standards
a
and
nuevos
regulations
productos,
for the
a la
proper
autorización de nuevos
carrying
productos
out of
farmacéuticos.
clinical
Entonces,
trials,
en
specifically
este
clinical
sentido,
trials
hay
to
una
test new
pregunta con
medications,
respecto a la
new
GBT y una con
medicines.
respecto a
So
la
there
participación de
were
otros
questions about
en este foro en
participation of
particular que me
others
quisiera muy
in this
brevemente
forum.
responder.
I
Con
wanted to
respecto a la
address
GBT,
this
la
regarding the
GBT
GBT. GBT is a self-evaluation tool that belongs to the national regulatory systems that do oversight of medical devices and products. And it is part of the tool of the World Health Organization. We analyze the indicators and sub-indicators of clinical trials from the perspective of national regulators in terms of their implementation. It doesn't mean that there can't be other fora where we have more ample participation. Let me give you a concrete example. One of the points of GCT is to have a registry of clinical trials. For the person who asked about participation by the community, well, one of the issues explored by GBT is how these registers include all that is approved, all that is rejected, all the inspections carried out. So there is transparency in their activities vis-a-vis the community, and the forum then aims to exchange purely technical matters that are related to regulation and the work of national regulatory agencies. So these were my answers to the questions. Sarah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Let me see. I have a general reflection. On the one hand, I am very enthusiastic to learn that these tools are well received by all of you and that there is indeed a great deal of enthusiasm by the different actors in how useful this great initiative is. And as Adriana was saying, I think these are engines or drivers that will help to close gaps through standardization of key aspects in order to carry out clinical trials with transparency, collaboration, and capacity building. While these are not all the engines that exist, and of course, there are others on which we are going to be working in the future. There are other issues like what Pedro mentioned, for example, promoting encouragement for researchers and strengthening the researcher work to prevent brain drain from our countries. And this was also mentioned during the workshop in Brasilia that Ludovic was discussing initially. And this is part of the outstanding agenda. And we should continue to think about this. And also what Francisca talked about, the indicators and meeting the goals. A great concern that we have is are these things that are going to be truly used by people? How can we encourage implementation of all these engines, of all these drivers? I don't think it's not only an effort by PAHO, but it is an effort by all parties concerned, all stakeholders, and all those with whom we work in close collaboration in each country. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you. Thank you. Let me clarify regarding what Francisca said, and there's a point that regulatory agencies must do regarding the framework. They have to have indicators for their actions. There needs to be measurement, and there is measurement indeed. The metrics are important, how they should work efficiently and how they should perform. These are other issues that are discussed at the forum. Thank you, Patricia. Yes. Yeah, we make progress in one area and then we have a whole host of other questions coming up. And sometimes we find ourselves in a situation where X project may have an additional component, which would be fantastic, but this would delay launching of this other thing. I think Adriel is quite familiar with this challenge. So let me give you the floor so that you can share. Yeah, I have a general reflection as well. I think that we see the need to have a convergence so that we can use everybody's experience and create new developments based on the foundations of the prior development. So this is what we do. And for example, the horizon scanning is based on other data repositories. So these developments that we are presenting here today will be the starting points for new developments that will stand on our shoulders. And these are developments that come out of the region. And I think these are initiatives that will lead to new initiatives and new projects. So that is my conclusion, and I am very proud to be part of what we're presenting here. Thank you, Adriel. Well, there's still a lot that remains to be done. It's great to have Tiago in the team. They have the ability and the resources to truly take advantage of some of the tools that other people who are more traditional can't really manage yet. So I wanted to emphasize that sometimes we think we have a certain amount of information because we can do a search on Google and really we don't have the information, or maybe the information is not curated, or it can be information of any level whatsoever. So part of all these projects, part of all these engines that we are developing is that the information that is included there is of better quality, more rigorous, that it's not the same as doing a Google search. So sometimes we believe it's very easy to know who works on what, or who does research on what topic. But in fact, we've seen, for example, during the pandemic, it was very hard to know who was doing research on a specific angle of the disease, of the pandemic, what was the expertise of each person, which were the specific topics. And some things have made our research to be more challenging and difficult. So we need to emphasize the interrelation among the different efforts that we should do. And in addition to the commitment of PAHO to make all these resources available as transparently as possible and for everyone in the region. I think this needs to be emphasized. I don't know if anybody has a final word, but I wanted to again highlight something that was mentioned by Adriel. It's the issue of regional leadership. I think the region of the Americas has made headways, encouraging the vision of research, new research. It is research done to improve the health and well-being of the people. And by developing tools and orientations that lead us to do the work of research in a quicker manner. This is an effort by all, but I think this is a good time for us to build on what has already been built. We already have accumulated some lessons learned, but regarding pre-approved protocols, they will truly benefit from all these engines, these drivers, these gears, all moving along and making things move along. So we haven't shared the QR codes as yet where you can access these engines. Silvina, could you please share with us the resources? And I wanted to thank the support. I want to thank the panelists and the support of those who make these sessions possible, all the colleagues who support us, Frank Raposa, Magalis Quintana, Silvina, and our interpreters that make our language understanding easier. And so let me show you now to end a slide. We need to turn off all our cameras so that we can share that slide with the information. The information here are the QR codes. Thank you very much. And may you have a great rest of the day and evening, and let us keep in touch to continue collaborating. These are the QR codes here.
Accelerator.